Okay, so today my um, close reading and analyzation is going to be on The Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. And the selected text that we're going to go over is pages 22 to 26. And this book is based in Africa, in the Congo. So a little context is that Marlowe, who is an English seaman, travels to the Congo River, and the pages that we kind of see him go through the Congo are pages 22 and through 26, and we see his experience and like what he is witnessing as he tries to get to his location. So first of all, in Joseph Conrad Heart of Darkness, the book follows Charles Marlowe, who is an English seaman, and follows his journey in the Congo River. This book is also really heavily criticized for the portrayal of Africans and how they are depicted in the story. The Heart of Darkness violates so many human rights, including slavery, torture, and starvation. And we see this not only in those few pages that I'm going to do a close reading of, but throughout the whole book, and how the conditions they are treated and how they are living in, it's just really horrendous. Joseph Conrad put this part in the text right at the beginning, and I feel like it's almost just to give the reader a feel of how the story is going to go, and how it kind of like says they've been in the Congo for so long. It kind of sets the setting and the tone that this isn't going to change for a very long time. The descriptions of Africans are dehumanizing in many ways in these pages. Joseph Conrad wants the readers to know that this is how they were seen and treated because of greed and the search for ivory. So to start off with the few pages, or with my thesis, really my thesis being that the Heart of Darkness violates so many human rights, including slavery, torture, and starvation. And so on my close readings, we're gonna go starting from page 22 to 26, and I'm give multiple examples in the book. So on pages 22, it describes Congo as an inhabited devastation. This is because of the European colonialism and how they are treating the natives and how they are ruining their location because they want to search for gold and ivory. The word devastation holds so much description because they are in ruins and waste. That's really what devastation is. People in those conditions are not meant to live like that. And following how they are, with the description of Africans, a lot of people, mostly black and naked, moved about like ants. So we kind of, right off the bat, we see that they are seen as animals. They are not seen as humans. And also another thing that's very dehumanizing is that they are seen with no to little clothes, so you kind of see everything out. So, and then on the same page we see that they are we see they're in a lot of stress, the Africans, because when a horn is tooted, like a car is going through, they run and get out of the way. And this doesn't say why, but we can infer that this is because they are scared that they or most likely to get punished if they do not act of the way that they should act, and also because they are giving a warning, and if they don't move they will get ran over, which shows again that the Europeans do not care about the natives of the land. Okay, then moving on to page 23, we see a very long and detailed paragraph of this of the depiction of Africans during this time, and what they, like I said on page 22, what they would wear if they wore any clothes. So black rags around their lions, could see every rib and joint of their limbs like knots in a rope. Each had an iron collar on his neck, connected together like a chain. So they only had a rag to cover them, compared, if we were comparing them to a white man at that time, or really anything, comparing them to a white man, a white man would be wearing a suit. this is really right off the bat that you can see the power dynamic between them. And obviously their lower status seen as nothing. So as long as they didn't care how they violated them. They were starved, as you can see, as they can see their ribs shown in their body. They had no food to feed them and or support all their slavery that they were doing, what they were forced to do really that they were doing. So much labor, and they had no nutrition value of food to keep them. Um, they were tortured and kept in a strict program with the iron collars. And so I also kind of added when someone puts a collar to something, it's usually an animal, and it's a form of ownership. So we kind of see them, how they were treated, how they were seen as animals again, and how they Europeans owned them because they put a collar to them so they wouldn't escape, and they were, like I said, they were all chained up. So if one tried to run away, everybody would face the consequences of that one person's action. And moving on to page 24, they're seen as savages. Page 24 has a quote that says, "Complete death-like indifference of unhappy savages." So they have many reasons to be unhappy. They are kind of like, they're like, almost in a way saying that they are ungrateful. Complete death-like indifference of unhappy savages. The word savages has a definition of someone being brutal or a vicious person. And I find this very hypocritical, just because the Africans were nothing like that. If anything, it was the Europeans who should be considered as savages for the treatment of Africans. Also, the word, it has this quote sentence, the chain gang, which is another phrase that has a way to refer to them. They were not viewed as humans nor enemies because they did not cause any harm or danger, but rather as criminals and inmates. And we can see this how throughout history, how inmates and criminals were treated. They were starved. They were forced to do this crazy labor. But most of the time, those criminals, I say most of the time because depending on what period of time we're viewing, it could just be an innocent person. But if we're talking about criminals who did horrible things, it's because they did those things, and they almost like saying your actions have consequences. But these people were very innocent, and for them to be treated like that is another really horrible and violating way to be seen and treated as. And then going on to one of the last two pages, page 25, they were described as black shapes, not humans, but as black shapes. The racism in the book goes from the beginning to end. And then another kind of following another quote, it says, "While they rest near the trees, they were said to be clinging with life." A quote says, "Clinging to life, attitudes of pain, abandonment, and despair." Those three words, pain, abandonment, and despair, really just are all three really sad and depressing ways to describe someone and something. And they are half alive, half dead. They're full of pain because of how they're treated. They have no food. They are holding on to their last breath. And then also, I think they were really tortured from the beginning the Europeans arrived, to the end. And I think the word abandonment is such a sad way for Joseph to describe the way that they are left, because they are stranded with no help, no aid, and no one to have mercy on them. So it's such a horrible way to see your last breath leave the earth with nothing really, with nothing but pain. And then just to wrap up the last page, page 26, they were left with nothing, but they kind of following page 25, it was kind of a whole put together following. So on page 26, they were left with nothing but their own breath, nothing but black shadows of disease and starvation. And I think throughout this presentation, we kind of progress from animals to I'm sorry, from animals to shapes. Again, just they were seen as everything but human. So they were described as black shapes, not human, but as black shapes. Again, that's such a very dehumanizing way to describe someone. They are degrading them from animals to nothing but objects again. It's sickening to read about this and how much greed and evil humans can be. The racism in the page where they're trying to tell a young boy, comparing it to a black older man, but then one of the characters says, "But you never know with them. It's hard to tell," um, and which is really crazy to think about, because if you're saying, "Oh, like it's an older man, he can handle so much hard and labor," but again, they were putting young boys to work, and those young boys were being starved and were being put again in these horrible conditions. This young boy could have been no more than 11 years old. And then another thing that I kind of um, point out, where on page there's a line on page 24 where Joseph describes all white men to also look alike, and for them to be hard to tell apart. And then again, just some textual analysis. They were living in unworthy living conditions, again with devastation, ruins, and waste. They were seen as animals. To later on in the book, they were just named black shapes, just objects really. And then starvation, torture, very malnourished, no food. You could see the rib. And just ending the presentation with, in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, we see how he portrays how multiple ways of human violations, how Africans were treated as slaves, to being tortured, to being starved to the brim of death, and most of them did die because of their labor and the conditions that they were forced to be put in. So thank you.